Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlawn Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlawn Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome to this edition of Access to Democracy. If I can open on a personal note today, our Access to Democracy crew lost one of our most valued and treasured friends. Dwayne Brucehaver passed away this week. Dwayne was a crew member on this show for many years, and I had the good fortune to meet him when I appeared as a guest on this program. But he was a real great friend to me as I started to learn the ropes to be a co-host for this show with our regular host, Alan Miller. Dwayne, you will be missed by all of us, and we send our sincerest condolences to his wife, Siri, and to his family. We have a very special returning guest today, a very good friend of mine, Colleen Moriarty, who is the Executive Director of Hunger Solutions Minnesota. Welcome back to Access to Democracy, Colleen.
Well, Steve, I'm so glad to be back. Thanks for inviting me.
Glad to have you here. So remind our viewers once again, what is Hunger Solutions Minnesota?
Hunger Solutions Minnesota works with all of the different hunger relief agencies in the state of Minnesota. We're a full capacity hunger relief. We do advocacy on behalf of the more than 300 food shelves. We work with the food banks, the feeding programs, and we work on issues from school breakfast and child care, issues around nutrition, all the way to benefits for seniors. So one of the things that we are highly focused on is how can we get the information about what federal benefits are available to our citizens that they may not know about or be using that could help them lead a more healthy life.
Like eligibility for the SNAP program,
Absolutely.
What used to be called food stamps?
Absolutely.
Because people may be eligible and not know it?
Right. I think that there's some misinterpretation of who's eligible for the program. We've worked hard in this state to make sure that it's a responsive tool. We know it's a responsive tool on the federal level because during the discussions about the stimulus, it was really unemployment insurance extensions and the SNAP program that were looked to bring money into the local communities to stimulate the economy. And that's because when you get your SNAP benefit, you spend it at the local stores.
So let's talk for a moment, Colleen, if you can kind of describe for our viewers today, who's going hungry in Minnesota and why do they find themselves hungry? It seems a bit difficult for people to understand. We live near some of the richest farmland, not just in America, but in the world. And yet we have people in our communities, even right here in Eagan, who may be hungry. Who's hungry and why?
Well, I think that you just need to look only as far back as the recession that we're just climbing our way out of to see that the numbers of people who have needed services of food shelves or of SNAP programs or of meal programs have increased by double digits, particularly in the surrounding suburbs where you didn't see that kind of use until we really hit the 2002 mark and beyond. And what we know is this. There are a lot of places in your budget, if your income isn't going to increase or you've lost your job, there are a lot of places where you have no flexibility about what you're going to spend. You don't get to dictate what your house payment is or what you're going to spend on your utilities or what your transportation costs are. And the only thing you really have anywhere to kind of pull from is really that food budget. And so if that is really under stress, then you're food insecure. We know, for instance, that there are 8,500 visits to food shelves every day in the state of Minnesota. So the need has been enormous and the response has been great. but it has not come without a cost.
Now, some of the critics in the U.S. Congress have complained that, well, we need to make drastic reductions in what we're spending on nutrition support programs like food stamps. Now it's called SNAP, which stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. And they're saying we need to make deep cuts because so many people have become eligible for these programs. But isn't the reason they become eligible what you just talked about?
The
That
reason they're
numbers
eligible is because they're
spiked.
poor.
They spiked during the recession,
Right.
but wouldn't we also expect those numbers to start to decline gradually as
Right.
the economy recovers? Because these are temporary programs, not permanent programs.
Right. The average Minnesotan's on the program 9 to 10 months, and the average benefit is about $121 a month. Now, the program was designed and redesigned actually by Senator George McGovern and Senator Bob Dole in the 60s to expand and contract with the economy, with the needs. And so it only makes sense that the program would have expanded during the recession to
Right.
be able to meet the needs of our citizens, and will contract when that need is less. People ask me though, why is SNAP being targeted so heavily in the discussions? And really, the fact of the matter is it's one of the last entitlements left that you can really take aim at. And if your agenda is to take aim at entitlements and your agenda is to strip out the safety net for poor people, then that's why they're looking at SNAP.
It seems more than curious to a lot of us too that they seem to aim their budget cutting fervor on programs like nutrition programs like SNAP when this isn't really what's adding significantly to the federal deficit.
No, it's 1/10 of 1% of the federal budget. And
That-
yet it's receiving all of this negative conversation.
And isn't a much bigger factor actually the massive tax cuts that have gone disproportionately to the wealthiest people in the country? That and the cost of 2 wars.
Right,
over
that's
the
what
past
created the
decade.
deficit, is the fact that we put 2 wars on a charge
Not
count.
because we're trying to feed people.
Right, right.
And let's talk a little bit further about this. So what is the average SNAP benefit right now, do you know?
$121 in the state of Minnesota.
Which over the course of a month works out to approximately what per meal? Do we have a breakdown on
It's
that?
about $1.10 maybe per meal. But remember, SNAP is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's not meant to meet all of your nutritional needs. 60% of the people who are on SNAP are employed or are, or receive benefits of some other kind. It's meant to, and that's why the storm last June, for instance, was so dramatic at the end of a month for so many families, because they had cobbled together all their resources to get as much food as they could for themselves and their families, and then when they were wiped out and lost it, they weren't eligible again for benefits until the next month.
And let's talk a little bit about some of the ways that Hunger Solutions is fighting hunger right here in Minnesota. I know from your website, Hunger Solutions, you help sponsor what's called the Minnesota Food Hotline, and I think we have a graphic with that number.
Right.
I can read it. 1-888-711-1151 for individuals or families who find that the cupboard is bare and they may not have enough to eat. But
Right.
tell us about how Hunger Solutions supports the food hotline.
Well, it is a program of Hunger Solutions, and we work in cooperation with the Department of Human Services and with all of the human services that are available throughout the state. So we receive calls from every county in the state of Minnesota, and mostly they range from people who have, for instance, right now AARP sent out a mailing to their membership asking if there were people, seniors in particular, who had questions about their eligibility, and they call. The phone rings pretty much nonstop, and there are people, and we run them through a screening tool, which is very brief, and we try and determine which programs they might be eligible for, and then we mail them out a packet that has all the follow-up information in it, and we also, with their permission, follow up with a phone call to see if they have any questions.
And Hunger Solutions is also active with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Commodity Food Program.
Right.
There's something called TFAP. What does TFAP stand for?
The
What is it?
Emergency Assistance Food Program. Now that is, the commodity program is what people used to know as the government cheese.
Cheese.
And
right.
but it's
much
not.
more than
It's
cheese.
not. It's really the backbone of the hunger relief system through the 300 plus food shelves in the state of Minnesota. And we act as the non-governmental partner with the state of Minnesota and the federal government to distribute that government product on the basis of the numbers of people living in poverty in every area of the state of Minnesota. It's a very equitable process. And we make sure that food is available through the food banks, the Feeding America food banks, to the food shelves at low or no cost. So some of the food banks make it available at no cost, and you can potentially charge between 4 cents and 12 cents a pound, but that's still a very reasonable.
Low cost.
Yes, and it's high quality product. It's fruits, it's vegetables, it's chicken, it's frozen ground beef. You know, it's very, very high quality food.
And Hunger Solutions is also active with an initiative you have called the Food Shelf Capacity Building Program. Say a word about that.
That's really where we work with local food shelves to make sure that they have the tools they need to deliver their service with dignity to the people that they're serving. Do they need assistance with their volunteer boards? Are they fully acquainted and trained on civil rights? Do they understand what it is, how they're meeting their community needs? And so we work with them on that. We're just in a conversation this morning with the state about doing some planning meetings about some more training for the food shelves. So we're always looking to improve that area.
Colleen, as part of that work, would that also include not just helping them get, for example, additional refrigerators or freezers, but would it actually involve actually helping open a food shelf in a community?
It could, if the community finds that although we have pretty good coverage, but we do know that there are some holes in some areas.
Is that more in greater Minnesota and some areas where distances between towns may be farther than it is here in the Twin Cities?
Yes. But even in the Twin Cities, you can find yourself in a position where there are some holes. So.
And then you also have an exciting initiative called the Summer Backpack Program. Tell us about that. I have a feeling this involves kids.
It does. You know, this summer we were so fortunate because we were recipients of some bonus money through the federal government and the state. And the Commissioner of Human Services, Lucinda Jensen, said, you know, in the past some of that bonus money, 75% of it goes back to the counties for their efforts. But the 25% had gone into the general fund, and the commissioner said this year, we're not going to do that. We're going to funnel it back into the community. And so that was the funds that were made available for summer backpacks and for some voucher programs for fresh fruits and vegetables and some support of the senior farmers market program. So that really meant that children who didn't have access to free or reduced lunch or free or reduced breakfast like they would during the school year had the availability of a backpack program so they could have the kind of nutrition they needed.
And do we have an idea how many kids benefit from this in Minnesota?
Not off the top of my head, but I do know that through the food banks that they had already had some levels of service, but they were able to increase in every one of the food banks.
And finally, an initiative that you pursue, which is dear to my heart, being a former legislative advocate myself, you have the Voice of Hunger Advocates Network.
Right.
Say a word. What is the Voice of Hunger Advocates Network?
Well, that's where you can go on our website and sign up to receive alerts or more information about things that are coming forward. There's a lot happening at the federal level, and there will always are things happening at the state and local level about the hunger issue. And this is a way for you to become an active partner. But maybe it's just, clicking through an email to your local elected representative and saying, I don't want the SNAP funds cut in the Farm Bill, or I'm, interested in more funding from the state for our local food shelves. And so this is a way to really become an active voice for basic needs in the community.
And someone who's interested in doing this, many of us may have family members or who have friends who've dealt with food insecurity issues and not having enough to feed their families. And so a way for people to become active, if they want to do more with your Hunger Advocates Network, they can contact you at Hunger Solutions Minnesota.
Just go on our website. We have a newly redesigned website, and our slogan is now "Winning Minnesota's Food Fight." So we want you to join us.
Winning the food fight?
Yes.
Images of John Belushi and
Right.
Animal House spring to mind for some reason. Does the state of Minnesota actually provide any direct assistance to food banks and food shelves in Minnesota? And if they do, what is that?
Well,
What
here's
form
how
does
they
that
do
take?
it. They, the state of Minnesota, through the Agriculture Department, the Agriculture Bill, helps to fund milk programs, removing surplus milk and making milk available at a lower reduced cost to the food banks and then to the food shelves. So under the Department of Agriculture, that's how that is done. In addition to that, since 1985, there has been a funding allocation to the through the state of Minnesota to all the food shelves. And we lobby for that every year, or advocate for that every year. And we were successful with all of our partners last year getting an increase, the first time since the 80s, to that fund. We got it increased by $780,000. So that was wonderful, and that was more money that goes directly to the food shelves to be able to meet their needs.
And this again was approved by the legislature
Yes.
and signed into law by
Yes.
Governor Dayton.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and it's an annual appropriation that has to come up, or biennial? Does it
It's a
come up
biennial.
once every 2 years
Right,
then?
right.
Okay.
So it was $2.4 million, so this is an additional $738,000, which is considerably increasing it, and it will stay that way now. It's a permanent increase.
I imagine that's going to help a lot of people who, saw funding for nutrition programs fall pretty flat during
Right,
those years that
right.
you talked about. Let's shift back, if we can, for a minute to the national scene. We
Sure.
talked earlier about proposed cuts to SNAP. Earlier this year, in September, the Republicans passed a bill in the U.S. House of Representatives calling for nearly $40 billion, 40 with a B, billion, in cuts to the SNAP program over the next 10 years, and that these cuts would affect many of the poorest people in our country, including millions of kids, seniors, even veterans.
Right.
How many people in Minnesota would lose their SNAP benefits completely?
If the program were completely instituted the way that bill in the House went through, it was 35 million people, or 35,000 people would immediately lose their assistance in the state. So in the state, we have about 500,000 people roughly who are on the program. And really what they were saying was that they want to cap the program, and they want to make sure that the things that we've fought together hard as Minnesotans, like eliminating the vehicle exclusion, or the burial funds, which we had that was another waiver that we were able to get. Because what we found was a lot of elderly people had put aside money in a burial fund so that if something happened to them, their families wouldn't have worry about how they were going to pay for the funeral. And then that was considered an asset, and it was keeping them from being eligible for the program. So we went to the legislature and said, let's remove the asset test. It's a burden for eligibility. It's a burden for, it's an extra paperwork burden, and we want the tool to be responsive. And thank goodness we did, because then when the recession came, we were able to help people right on the ground before they spent down to their last cent so they could attain self-sufficiency more quickly. So this is the kind of thing that the Congress is talking about reinstituting, along with work requirements, to which a 96-year-old person who called our helpline last week said, I'm really much too old to go back into the workforce.
96 years
Yes,
old?
yes.
I think there are a lot of people a lot younger than 96 who would feel that it's a little too late to go back into the workforce to be
Right.
able to maintain their eligibility
And frankly,
for benefits.
Steve, this is a benefit that people who have worked hard all their lives,
They've earned it.
they've earned this. This is a benefit like Medicare, like Social Security. There's, it's just one way to supplement your budget so that you can stay in your home longer, and your medicine will work better, and your family won't have to worry about you.
Now, we should say, before people get too alarmed about this, that these proposed $40 billion in cuts over 10 years, this is a non-starter in the U.S. Senate, where the Democrats have very different ideas
Right.
about this. They're not going to go along with cuts anywhere to this extent. But even the Senate is looking at some more modest cuts, so both the House and Senate are presumably looking at cuts to nutrition programs. A lot of people seem very obsessed with the cost of programs like SNAP or the WIC program, the Women, Infants, and Children's program, even though both of these are very small items in the overall size
Right.
of the federal budget. But let's talk for a minute, if we could, about the costs of not feeding people in our community. What are some of the costs that all of us pay from having kids who go to school hungry, from adults or seniors who don't get adequate nutrition? What are some of the costs that we bear as a society?
Right. Well, you're absolutely right. One of the things we know is that the achievement gap can never be narrowed with children who don't have the proper nutrition to be able to concentrate in school. There's a reason that districts give kids breakfast on test day, and that is because children perform better when they have nutrition available. So eliminating nutrition, whether it's in the household or at the school lunch table, is another way of really hindering and enslaving children to not perform well in school. Then we know that as we move up, women who receive proper prenatal care and who receive the kinds of things that they need both in pregnancy and in early childhood have more successful pregnancies and save on those kinds of costs in the healthcare system. And as you move through life, that's true, whether it's young people being able to get the kind of food they need or people being able to have the kind of nutrition they need, along with seniors. Certainly it's a huge issue.
My sister is a teacher in Minneapolis. She teaches in intermediate school there. And she made a comment to me one time. She said, you get one time to be a fifth grader.
Right.
And kids have one chance at getting on the right course toward their physical and mental development. And if we shortchange them on the nutrition side, we're going to have consequences that we're going to be paying for years.
Right, right. And not only that, but the numbers of people that have reported that they were skipping meals so that their children could eat that they would go without having dinner so that their kids could eat, and the enormous strain that puts on a family. If you had to spend, I raised 3 boys, and so I always think, when I came home from work and they were there or they're just getting home, and I had maybe picked them up from childcare, and I knew that there was no way I was going to be able to get them any food once we got home. And that next opportunity they were going to have to eat is when they went to school in the morning. The enormous pressure, strain, and just grieving that would go on, and the heightened level of activity that's caused by children who are hungry, that throws families into chaos.
There have been many, many studies by healthcare professionals that actually verify what we're talking about. The kids who don't get a proper meal, proper nutrition, they don't do as well in school.
Right.
And the consequences of that are going to follow them for a long time.
Absolutely.
And also just something else we just have to say, it seems unconscionable to me that in the richest country on this planet that we allow people to go hungry, that hunger is really a matter of choice,
right.
A matter of policy choices. And when you see certain people in the U.S. Congress who are willing to allow that to happen, something has gone wrong with our politics.
I think that's absolutely true, but I think the other thing is Americans have a hard time, they think of hunger and they maybe think of it in terms of global hunger. And it's hard to recognize what hunger looks like in your local community.
Right.
And so, if you have no level of access, no transportation to a grocery store where you have access to fresh fruit and vegetables, and your only access to that may be at the corner market, where it's very limited access, then your $10, instead of buying, maybe choosing between the apple and the banana and other fruit that might be available or vegetables that might be available there, but you can get, 3 pizzas for $10 and at least you'll have something to bring home. That puts a whole nother dilemma. And I just think we need to look at the fact that as a community there's a way to solve this. The federal government has an enormous role in this. If local charities, particularly religious-based charities, were counted on to provide this kind of service, you'd have to add $50,000 onto the bill of every religious institution in the country, and you'd have to have that $50 represent, or that money represented for 10 years to be able to just meet the needs that are met by the federal government in 1 year.
What you're saying is it's really unrealistic for policymakers when they say, well, the private sector or the nonprofit sector can do all of this.
Right.
The fact is that they cannot.
They cannot.
They cannot meet all the need. You actually need the private sector, private companies that help donate surplus food. You need nonprofits,
right,
such as the food shelves, and you need government through programs like SNAP and WIC and other federal nutrition programs. We're starting to run short on time. I want to ask you real quick about the Farm Bill. Congress has been unable to pass a Farm Bill up to this point, which is very disturbing to a lot of people here in Minnesota, where if you're not directly a farmer, certainly Minnesota's economy is deeply affected by the health of the agriculture industry. And there seems to be a big hang-up over the issue of some in Congress, Republicans, who want to separate out the nutrition programs like SNAP from the rest of the Farm Bill.
Right, and they're back
advocating
together
doing
now.
this, and actually the congressman from this district has voted to do just that. I think it's a terrible mistake on his part, but he's done it. What is your thought about that, about separating out nutrition programs from the rest of the Farm Bill?
Well, I believe that what the thinking behind that is that they really want to eliminate the Farm Bill in total, both for the farmers and for the nutrition. And that by splitting them off and not allowing this really highly functioning partnership that's been there between the nutrition folks and the farmers to be able to work together to bring urban legislators along with rural legislators, that's just another way of killing the Farm Bill altogether. So whether you are coming at it from the agriculture standpoint or you're coming looking at this from the nutrition standpoint, it's death to the Farm Bill to do that.
Well, as our time starts to wind down, we want to give a very special plug to an event that Hunger Solutions Minnesota sponsors annually, and it is called the Walk to End Hunger, and I'm going to hold this up so that our camera can get a good look at this. Tell us about this event, Colleen.
It is Thanksgiving Day at the Mall of America, and it is, No Hunger November, and it is from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock in the morning. You can come out and join us at the Mall of America. There are 2 tracks this year, one on more family activities, and some of the rides are open at the amusement level, and there are special characters there, and a lot of strollers, and it's wonderful.
You're going to have entertainment for the kids?
Yes. It's great. It's a real celebration, and then there's also a fitness level that's up on the upper level of the Mall of America that has more of a, you've walked this far, this gets rid of a piece of pie, or you can do that. But it's a really meaningful way for families, individuals, and members of the community to really take a stand on Thanksgiving morning on food for all.
And I'm going to add a personal note here too, as I've shared with you. My wife Bonnie and I are going to join you that morning. We want to make this part of our new Thanksgiving Day tradition. So
that's wonderful.
I hope that our folks who are out there viewing who are
Yes.
a little bit concerned about how many calories you might consume later on Thanksgiving Day, here's a chance to burn some off before you put some on.
Right.
So come on out to Mall of America on Thanksgiving morning,
Right.
7 a.m.
Right.
Where do they meet at the mall? It's a big place. Where do
It's
we
in the
meet at?
Rotunda. That's where it starts, at the Sears Rotunda.
Which
right
is
off
on,
the-
I believe, the east side of the mall,
Right.
right? Yeah.
And it's really fun, and people just get. Thomson Reuters is one of the
One of our
supporters.
sponsors is a
Yes,
sponsor of this
so that's
event.
great, and their contribution is very meaningful, along with Mosaic and all the rest of our sponsors. So we just really want to see you, though. I'm so glad you're going to join us.
And if you come and walk, you get a T-shirt.
You
too.
do, you get a great T-shirt.
In
yeah.
addition to feeling good about doing something for your community and
Right.
helping other people before we all count our blessings on Thanksgiving. Well, Colleen Moriarty, thank you so much for the work that you and your colleagues do at Hunger Solutions. You and I are old friends,
We
and
are.
I know your colleagues, and I just admire you so much for the work that you do every day to make Minnesota a better place and to bring the fight against hunger home. And thank you for being our guest today and making
thank
our
you.
viewers aware of what we can do to join you in the fight against hunger here in
Thank you.
Minnesota. And I hope that you'll plan on coming back to see us again.
Absolutely. Steve, I wouldn't miss a chance to sit down and talk with you
Thanks
ever.
so much, Colleen. Pleasure
Okay.
to have you here
Thank
today
you.
at Access to Democracy. Thank you for joining us today.